everybody. Welcome to Magical Mindfulness 2. I'm your host, Jools Sinclair, author and creator of See the Beauty, a mindful gratitude and happiness program that helps people celebrate their magnificent lives. I am so excited with today's guest, and I'm so excited that you all are here. This is just going to be a fantastic show. So make sure that you have your favorite beverage of choice. Again, today I'm drinking peppermint tea out of one of my favorite mugs. Let me show you. It says begin. I love this mug. It's funny, like when I go out into the kitchen in the mornings, I'll just like pick a mug, and then I try not to look at it too closely, and I feel like, is this going to be a message for me? If I get a mug I don't like, I just put it back and get another message. That's what I was thinking. But anyway, I'm so glad that you're here. If you are keeping a journal, which I hope you are, throughout this whole Magical Mindfulness 2 retreat, make sure that you have it handy. Make sure that you have all your wonderful and fun markers or whatever it is you want to use for your journal as well. And let's go ahead and get grounded and relax so that we can absorb all the wonderful information. We have such an amazing guest today, and I'm so excited that she's here. So let's just take 3 breaths together, 3 deep breaths. And as usual, I've been sending each and every one of you love before the recording. I like to just sit and just send out love. And I've been sending it to everyone, my friends, my family, and to everyone in this magical community that where we're coming together in connection. We're coming together to really just have this wonderful, safe, fun, informative space, right? These are different times and challenging times, and I'm so thrilled that you're here because I feel like all of our guests on this show really want to help everybody just get through this time and give them tools and techniques to get through this time well. So let's just take 3 deep breaths of all that love and all that beauty that's surrounding you right now. So take a deep breath in. Hold it. Exhale. Take another deep breath in. Hold it. Release. And on this last deep breath together as a community, I want you to think of all that love. And when you release or exhale, I want you to let go of any lingering fear or doubts or worry that you might have, because we're going to be in the present. We're going to stay present in this next bit of time together. And you can just feel the love and feel the beauty that's surrounding you. So take a deep breath in. Hold it. Release. Open your eyes. And we are ready to begin. Vania Phitidis is an intuitive eating counselor and a mindful eating teacher who has been coaching and mentoring people for more than 25 years. Vania is on a mission to free women from the belief that they must be thin to be valued, powerful, in a relationship, successful, loved, and healthy. She wants to leave behind a world in which beauty is irrelevant, and instead, people are owning their power and making the contribution only they can make. Vania, hi, and welcome to Magical Mindfulness.
Hi, Jules. It's so lovely to be here. I'm really excited to be with you and everybody.
Oh. Well, I am so excited that you are here, because I have to say that this is one of those subjects that personally, first of all, I'd love to learn more about this and about what you do. But also, it's like something that I've really found challenging for almost my whole life. So I can't wait to dive in. And as we said in the intro, you are an intuitive eating counselor. And you also have the mindfulness-based eating awareness, which is what you do. Could you just talk a little bit about that, what that means, and how you help people with doing that?
Yeah. Really, what intuitive eating is well, I call it peaceful eating, but I use intuitive eating and mindful eating in a sort of in a combination to create peaceful eating. And really what it is to help people get off the dieting roller coaster, stop fighting with food and fighting with their own bodies, and come back to a place of letting our bodies guide us to make our decisions around what, when, and how much we're going to eat and exercise. Because the culture has really taught us not to trust our bodies, and have kind of set up this adversarial relationship that we have both with our bodies and food. So what I do in the work, when I'm working with people, I say it's more unlearning than learning, because actually we're born knowing how to eat. We're born knowing when we've had enough. We're born knowing what we want. And we're born being in tune with our own bodies. We know when we're cold, when we need you call it a diaper, we call it a nappy. When you need it changed, we know when we're thirsty, when we know when we're full. And babies will turn away from the bottle or the breast or whatever when they've had enough. But what happens is that our natural relationship with our bodies and food gets interfered with somewhere along the way. And so what I do when I'm working with people is help them unlearn a lot of the messages that they've learned, so that they can come back to a sense of listening to their own bodies and trusting their own bodies again.
I love that concept that we know how to do this, but something obviously we get thrown off track for different reasons along the way. What are some of those reasons? Like why do so many people have, I'm trying to say the right word, I guess, challenges with food? Would you call it that?
Yeah. Well, there are lots of reasons, but it really boils down to what is communicated to us, and what is communicated, how it's communicated, and which avenues the communication comes through. So we learn really from very young, particularly as women and girls. Not only, I think the marketers have woken up to the fact that they've been missing out on half of the market. So they're trying to now push this mistrust of our own bodies onto men and boys now as well. But disproportionately, it does affect girls and women. And so we are taught from a very young age that we need to be pretty, that we need to perform in a certain way, that we need to look a certain way, and that how we look is super important. We're taught from very young that actually our appearance for girls is our currency. It's the way we make our way through the world. And boys aren't given that message. They are allowed to be messy, strong, boisterous, they're allowed to adventure. They're allowed to discover. We need to not get dirty because we'll make our pretty dresses, dirty, right? We're given that message. I remember from when I was a young child, my grandmother telling me I needed to sit with my legs together because that's ladylike, when I was really, really little. And so we're given these messages from really, really young of how we need to look. That then gets conflated as we get older with what is healthy. So on the one side, we've got an appearance-based ideal that we are schooled into desiring, and this is pushed at us through characters on TV, storylines. The fat girl usually is the thin girl's friend who's the tag along, who's the funny one, right? She's not usually the one who gets the boyfriend.
Right.
So we see all of this in the storylines. The fat characters we laugh at. The fat characters are the evil ones. All of this kind of messaging tells us that body diversity is not actually a thing, and that people who have bigger bodies, that there's something wrong with them in some way, that they're greedy, that they're lazy, that they don't have any self-control or willpower. But actually, there's natural diversity in bodies, right? There is just natural diversity. But what the media does is they show us a certain idealized image almost all of the time. 67% of American women are so-called plus size, but only 2% of the images that we see portray that.
Yeah.
There's a massive imbalance there. And there's something called the mere exposure effect, where what we are exposed to is what we come to prefer. So we get bombarded with these images, and then it's rare, right? There's only 4 or 5% of people actually naturally have that body type that we are told we should all have. So what is rare is what everybody wants, you know, that's how marketing works.
So a lot of it you're talking about is sort of socialized as girls and women get older, they're kind of like fed into this machine of marketers, basically. Do you find, like, with the people that you work with, also, is there also sort of like, you know, the family life and does that all affect it as well? And also, I would love to hear your journey, you know, how you got here as a healer with, you know, helping people find, I love self-acceptance is such a big part of your message, self-acceptance and peaceful eating. I'm sure you didn't just randomly just pick that as a topic. So I've probably given
No,
you.
I wasn't sort of paging through the yellow pages and thinking, oh, what should I do for a living? Oh, I know, that sounds good.
Why don't we start there, and then we'll work back to the family, but maybe you'll talk about that a little bit too.
Yes, I mean, how I came to do this work was through my own journey of disconnection and then reconnection with my own body. And as you were starting to say, I grew up in a family of dieters. My mom and my sister were always on a diet. And my sister's 8 years older than me, so she was quite a role model for me. And I remember from when I was really young, 8 years old or so, standing on my mum's bathroom scale and thinking, well, that number's too much. I don't know what number it was, but you know, it's not about the number. It was about this idea that I had already absorbed, that it needed to go down. And because I know that my mum and my sister used to weigh themselves every day, they had a little chart on the bathroom wall about, you know, this is the journey we're going on, this is how it's going to go, this is the actual one, and they'd plot it on the graph. So I was aware of all of this and taking it all in. And then, but then sort of bigger than that, there was, you know, things like, I remember things like my dad would exclaim when he saw some pretty woman on TV or walking down the street. He would just out loud say, geez, that girl's, you know, that girl, she's got legs up to her armpits. You know, I just remember that really, really clearly. So there was this definite message given that, as I said in the beginning, a woman's appearance is her currency. It's how she makes her way in the world, is how she looks. That's really, really important. And so this is the kind of culture that I grew up in. And I grew up in South Africa. We didn't have TV until I was 10 or 11. And
Wow.
even then, it only started at 6 p.m. There were no adverts in the beginning. You know, when we got adverts, we were so excited. We'd actually watch the adverts like it was like the main event. So I grew up quite sheltered from a lot of this kind of bombardment that
Yes.
perhaps you did grow up with more of, because you had loads of channels and advertising and stuff, whereas I didn't as I grew up. But that didn't save me from my exposure to this. I mean, my great grandmother, I've got to tell you this because it just blows me away. She grew up on a little Greek island in a tiny little village where they didn't even get running water until the 1970s, or electricity.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. So
Wow.
they cooked on an outside, an outside fire in a little, well, it was a little hut sort of thing. They had an outhouse for the bathroom, and, it was really, really basic. And she destroyed any photos that existed of her
Oh
under
no.
the age of, I don't know, 40, 50, 60. I'm not sure. There are only about 2 or maybe 3 photos that exist of her.
Oh
And I
my.
know photos weren't that common then anyway, but they were a big deal. They were photos of them. They did
Yeah.
have photos, but she destroyed them all because she didn't want anyone to know how she looked when she was young as she got
Wow.
older.
Wow. That is
And
just so, that's so big. I mean,
it is so big.
that just tells you so much of how that's ingrained. And
Mhm.
oh my gosh, that just breaks my heart, really, Vanya.
Yeah, it does. And so this is kind of in I think it's in our, I like to say, our cultural DNA, because
Yeah.
from the Renaissance we have been objectifying the female form, through art, and maybe
Right.
even before, I don't know, but certainly from then. And so this has been going on a long time. But then, so what happened to me is that I started to copy my mum and my sister, and started to fiddle around with my food, and not want, I would just not eat, or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then when I was about 13, I had some kind of dental orthodontic thing that was fixed into my mouth, and it caused a terrible infection. And I
Oh.
got very sick, and I couldn't eat, and I lost a load of weight. And even though I was sick as a dog, what I got was a lot of approval from other people about how thin I'd got. And I realized just how important it was, because it was like night and day. I went back to school after 2 or 3 weeks of being really sick, and just having so much approval from my peer group, that I decided I needed to try and maintain that. And so
Yeah.
even though I was so hungry when I got better, and I just needed to eat because, hey, that's what happens, right? It's just normal. Um,
You were you were
I
healthy.
became,
You needed to
yeah,
eat. Yeah.
exactly. I mean, my body was at a size that even though I was sort of tinkering around the edges, my body was at a size that it was happy at, right? It was just at its size
Yes.
that it needed to be. And what happened was an intervention, not an intentional one, but an intervention happened, which made me lose a lot of weight. But then my body wanted to naturally go back to where it was comfortable. And this is a natural drive to restore that. But
Right.
I felt ashamed because of all the messaging I'd received, both positive about my body shape, but also the negative messaging around, you know, bigger bodies, certainly than the one that I had at the age of 13 after being very ill. And so then that sort of set me on this trajectory of really an eating disorder, where I would just, eat everything in sight for weeks at a time, and then starve for weeks at a time, and sort of went on this kind of yo-yoing thing, which then developed into bulimia. and and then by the time I was 18, I was really quite depressed. And anyway, long story short, I asked my mother if I could go see a psychologist, who I did go and see. And when I eventually, because there was just so much shame around what I was doing, there was so much shame around the behavior. There was shame that I was out of control. There was shame that about my body, that I couldn't control it, that I couldn't control food, that it took me such a long time to tell him why I was even there. But the
Wow.
day that I did, because I was underage, I wasn't yet 18, he called my mother in when she came to pick me up from the appointment. And he said, this is a safeguarding issue. I have to tell your parent. And with no preparation, I mean, I'm sure therapists wouldn't do it that way these days. I certainly
Yeah.
hope not. But anyway, I had
Yeah.
no preparation. It was just like, call her in. This is what's going on. I was just
Yeah.
even more
Yeah.
ashamed. And I made a deal with my mom. I said, please don't tell dad that this is what's happening, because that would just be so mortifying for me that he would also know.
Yeah.
And I said, I'll just stop. I'll stop doing the behaviors if you don't tell him. And I actually did. I managed to cold turkey stop the bulimia, well, the behaviors, the throwing up behavior, but it didn't actually stop the eating disordered behaviors, really. It stopped the purging, but then I was over exercising and purging with exercise. And, I was still going on these really strict diets and then really long binges. And really, my weight would just fluctuate from one side to the other, you know, several times in a year sometimes. It would just really just swing from one thing to the other. It was still really out of control. I just wasn't throwing up. But it's just so interesting to me that kind of still, that wasn't picked up on as disordered eating, because
Right.
it's so normalized in our culture.
Well, it's
So
certainly,
normalized.
it is, and it's just interesting because I have a different journey with it myself, in that I haven't had bulimia, but definitely have just used eating as sort of an emotional
Mm-hmm.
barrier a lot of times since I was really small. And again, what you're saying though, that same thing about just not having that relationship with food of, like, it's just usually around stress, or it's just usually feeling shame, like, oh, I ate too much. And I just think about that, like, it's just like every day it's kind of like that. And it's like fascinating to
Yeah.
hear that. I mean, first of all, I can't believe that you were like so young and said, I want to go see somebody and get myself some help. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think most teenagers just kind of like, they just kind of keep going or whatever. But Vanya, this story is really, really like, it's a wow. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so how did you even, I'm sitting here like, how do you go from that?
Yeah.
How did you find your peace with food?
Yeah. Well, there's one thing that I want to insert into this, because I think that this is the case for many people these days, and that is the thing about health.
Right.
So what we're told, so on the one hand, we're sold this idea about how we need to look, and on the other
Right.
hand, we're sold this idea about what's healthy. And these two messages collide, well, they kind of come together,
Mhm.
and the answer on both sides of that equation is thin is better, and bigger is
Right.
worse. Bigger is bad, bigger is unhealthy, and it isn't true, right? It is not true. It is not that simple. Put it that way.
I
You
love
get
it. You say that, and I know that there'll be people in the audience saying, well, yes, it is. Yes, it's true. You can't be overweight and healthy.
You
But
can.
I love that you're saying that.
You
I
can. In fact, I don't use those BMI words of, I'm going to use them in quotation marks,
yeah,
overweight, obese, morbidly obese. Even underweight is problematic. All of those are problematic. And the reason they're problematic is because what they do is they pathologize body size. There are many markers to health. Many markers to health. Weight is not a reliable indicator of anybody's health. It really isn't. You get thin people who have cancer, who get heart attacks, who have strokes, who have diabetes. You do. We
yep,
all know people like that.
do.
You have, and I use the word fat as an absolute descriptor. It's not as a moral judgment, right? Which is another problem we have in our culture. They're fat people who are metabolically perfectly healthy. There are many, many, many of them. Many people are, on the higher end of the weight spectrum and really metabolically are quite healthy, because it turns out that actually what's more important, what's a better predictor of your health outcome, is your behaviors and your socioeconomic standing. If you're poor, you're going to have a worse health outcome. That's why COVID-19 is disproportionately affecting poorer people and people of color. Why? Because they're poorer in general. They're on the poorer end of the spectrum. So, if you are middle class and not a person of color, basically, because there's oppression that affects health because of stress. So I'm sort of getting quite sort of deep into this health argument, but I'm just going to draw it back to say health is a complex thing, and you can't boil it down to somebody's size. And so this is a very toxic message that we're giving people. And what it's doing is taking people away from their own knowing of their own bodies.
Well, so Vania, what's the solution here?
But I was going to just finish fast forward in my personal story. 20 years, 20 more years after I stopped the bulimia.
Wow.
Of disordered eating, stroke eating disordered behavior. I mean, there's a gray area there, of dieting and binging and dieting and 20 more years of that, until thank God, my really good friend called me up and said, I need to go on a diet. What are you doing? And I said, just don't. Just don't. Just stop. Why? Why are we doing this? We diet so that we can then be why? Why are we doing this to ourselves? And so then she went away and read some books and did some research, and she came back to me about 6 months later and said, read this book, that book, one of which was intuitive eating. And and I did, and that was when my mind was blown, which was the realization that dieting and actually intentionally trying to lose weight is the primary dysfunction, the primary reason for the dysfunctional or disordered relationship with food. For most of us, it's not all of us, okay? I will absolutely say it's not for everybody. Some people have had horrible trauma happen in their lives, which has really interrupted their relationship with their bodies and perhaps food. It's such a primary thing in our lives, food. So I'm not going to say it's for everybody necessarily, but for almost everybody, even if they have a trauma in their background, they have been exposed to these toxic messages about bodies and food and health.
Well, I love that you mentioned that, because I'm just having a flashback. I've been I don't do the diets anymore. I kind of gave up on that. But it just reminds me of when I was a child. It was Weight Watchers was the big thing. My family did kind of what your family did, and that everyone's going to go, they went through these cycles. Everyone's going to go on a diet, and then they kind of fall off, and then everyone's going to go on a diet. You lose weight and then they fall off. And so it just sounds like what you're saying is that just those layers and layers and layers of that diet mentality, and also what it does to your body is, I mean, that's a lot to break down, I would imagine. But of course, it's not going to create the thin body that you're trying to get. It's not.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not. And when I said right at the beginning, most of what I do with people is help them unlearn things. Like we call it fat phobia. It's this internalized fear of being fat, and it's completely understandable that people fear being fat, because look how fat people are discriminated against. You go to the doctor for an infected toenail, and they'll say lose weight, or a strep throat, and they'll say lose weight. These are true stories. You get misdiagnoses of health conditions because the doctor says lose weight and you'll feel better, and actually there's something else going on that they're not looking for, because they're seeing the weight.
Yes,
because
yes.
that's all they see.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's understandable that people fear this, because there is discrimination, not just in the doctor's office, but on the street. We're pretty much, all over the place. So there's a lot of unlearning that needs to happen of the messaging around food, around health, around bodies, around worthiness,
Yes.
around desirability and attractiveness. There's so much unlearning that needs to happen. And then, well, sort of not, and then it's not a sort of linear process, but as we're doing that, we're also trying to turn in towards ourselves, to really try to listen to what it is we need, because so much of the time, particularly when you've got caught up in this kind of diet mentality, we somehow learn to meet a whole host of our needs with food.
Right.
Like our need for rest,
Yes.
like our need for solitude, like our need for fun, novelty, a hug, just some emotional connection. So we need to learn how to recognize what it is we need, and we need to learn to give ourselves what we need, not so that we'll eat less, but so that we are meeting ourselves better, so that we are taking better care of ourselves, so that we have some other options, so that we feel more nurtured and nourished and fulfilled.
Well, I have to think, Vanya, that if we're doing more of what you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
probably you're not going to be eating quite as much, because
Yeah.
if you're eating because you don't have the hug, or because you're tired. This sounds like me, tired. I'm really
Yes.
tired, but maybe you don't have time to go lie down or whatever, so you're just
Mm-hmm.
trying to just get through whatever. But I would think that bringing everything more in balance would probably bring a sense where you're probably not eating as much.
Sure. And here's the rub for many people. I think I turn away many potential clients when I tell them this. And that is that you may not lose weight as a result of that. That's quite hard for people to accept, because our human bodies are pretty amazing things, but they take a really long time to evolve. And our bodies are wired for feast and famine, right? Because 200,000 years ago, in fact, it's happening, unfortunately, right now to human beings still on this planet, that they don't have enough food. And so our bodies are wired to keep us alive. So the way that we do that is that when there's been a famine, and in our, sort of middle class, more Western lives, that means a diet, because to the body, it's like a famine. What happens is our metabolism slows down, because we need to do more with less, right? There's less coming in, but we still got to keep going. So we need to do more with less. So we slow down the metabolism. We also elevate cortisol, our stress hormone. And what cortisol does is it signals the body to store more fat so that you can use it when you need it, because it's a famine and you don't know when the famine's going to end, right? Your body doesn't know that actually you live in a food abundant environment. It's the same thing to your body. So what it then does when you then break the diet or can't sustain it anymore, because, hey, it's just not possible, by the way, is that you then eat to restore your weight to the place where your body feels comfortable. But then what often happens is you gain more weight, because your body is preparing you for the next time there's a famine.
Right.
Which usually starts on a Monday.
It's a cycle.
Yeah, exactly.
Which sounds like exactly like with the dieting. So
it is exactly the same thing.
Same thing. It sounds, that's funny too, that your clients, it's like, no.
So what happens then over time, through all the decades of dieting, what happens is you You diet your way up to a higher weight.
Yes.
Yeah. And then we are still thinking with diet mentality, well, if I just am eating less, well, that's going to go down.
Right.
For some people it does. For some people it doesn't. Don't know. But what you get is your life back.
Well, that's something.
You relax around food. You know, feel more at ease in your own body. You go out and live your life instead of using up so much of your mental and physical energy trying to control your body.
Yeah.
It's a full-time job, really.
Yeah, I believe it. Well, and your whole business, the whole name of your business, Peaceful Eating. I mean, I think everybody would love to be able to learn how to do that, because I feel like, whether, like kind of what you're saying, whether you're thin or whether you're fat, the whole spectrum, probably 98% do not peacefully eat.
No.
Because
Because people who are thinner are trying to maintain their thinness, or they're very anxious about their health. Maybe they kind of internalize a lot of these health messages. There's a lot of anxiety around food for most people who are lucky enough to have enough food, actually. And then there's a lot of anxiety, obviously, around food for people who can't, you know, don't have access to enough food.
right. So it sounds like obviously it's not a simple fix, is what I'm thinking.
Nope.
And I had this question for you, Vanya, and I
Mm.
don't know if we talked about it, you know, when we talked before,
Mm.
but you know, right now COVID-19 is, you know, we're in this pandemic, and I know from myself and from other people that I've talked to that there's sort of this kind of crazy, I don't want to say crazy eating, but definitely not mindful eating and not peaceful eating, where it's almost like a reaction. You know, it's very stressful. People are worried. They're in a state of anxiety and fear, and they're kind of, you know, going towards food. You know, whatever food we can get, right? Which, I mean, we still have a lot of choices, but they're not the same. It's not like the same kind of choices. You're not able to get what probably you like to eat. So do you have like any, I don't know, any sort of tips for people who might be in this state of using food in that way to kind of help just relax and calm down? I mean, what would you say to that?
I wish this was an easy answer.
It's not going to be easy, is it?
Oh, I find it so funny when people ask me for tips, because I just go, I don't do tips.
Oh, it's coming back. I think you might have told me that.
Not a 1, 2, 3, you know.
Still asking it anyway, but
Yes, it's okay. I'll do my best.
what would you suggest?
See, a lot of people's panic around how they're eating at this time is rooted in a fear of gaining weight. If there was no fear of gaining weight, I give you any bet that if the people can afford the food and they've got enough food, they would not be worrying about it.
Huh.
If you knew for a certainty that no matter how much emotional eating you did, you would not be gaining a pound, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
I see what you're saying. but Vanya, if I just could interject this,
Yes.
it's like when I'm eating like that, I really don't feel very well.
Absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
like I feel bloated.
Of course.
It's not a good feeling.
No, it isn't. It isn't a good feeling. So the first thing that I would say is really to draw on compassion, you know, to have compassion for ourselves and for each other, that this is a very strange time. You know, it really, really is. And what people are saying is, you know, we're not in the same boat, but we're in the same sea. You know, we're all having an experience of this all at the same time, but to varying degrees depending on our level of privilege, frankly. And so to have compassion for whatever it is that you're feeling, whatever is going on for you.
That's nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the first thing. The second thing I want to say is it's really not the worst thing in the world to eat emotionally. And I really would like people to let go of the shame around it, and to be kind to themselves around it. Now, of course, there are things that we can do. So what I want to offer is, instead of how can I not eat emotionally, it's how can I eat emotionally in a way that is more mindful, that is kinder, and that is more honoring of myself where I am right now. Because we don't need more restrictions, right? There are enough restrictions out there. And actually, when we remove our permission to eat food or to eat certain foods, guess what? It drives your desire for that thing more. Ask any toddler. So, so what I would say is, if you are finding yourself drawn towards food, get the food. See if you can have the food and not be doing other things. Just have the food, not food and YouTube, not food and Facebook, not food and,
Work.
anything else.
Yeah.
Work.
Yeah.
Definitely not food and work. Just the food. So you have whatever it is you fancy, really, whatever it is you fancy, or whatever time of the day or night. Doesn't matter. If you can and it feels good to you, put it on a plate. Treat yourself well as you're going to be eating emotionally. Sit down. Let yourself have the time. Let yourself enjoy it. And then it's tune into yourself. It's just like, how am I doing? How am I feeling? Take a couple of breaths, because really breaths are always a good thing to do. They help us switch on our parasympathetic nervous system, help us relax, prepare us for digestion. When we're in the sympathetic state of, this kind of panic survival response, it's not great for our digestion. Right. Sometimes we think it's because of what we're eating, but really often it's because of the stress we're feeling, and we're not giving ourselves the time to just take a few breaths. That's all it takes. Just a few breaths. Check in with yourself. And then, we're going to do this exercise together.
I'm excited.
You can eat it. You don't need to do it the way we're going to be doing it right now, but just notice the taste of the food. Notice the texture of what you're eating. Ask yourself if you're enjoying it. So often we think we're enjoying something, and actually we're not really. And if you're not enjoying it, by all means, stop eating it and pick something else. Or maybe by then the need for it will have dissipated. And so you check in with yourself. Am I enjoying this? Is this tasty? And here's another one. Is it doing the trick for me? Is it helping me to calm? Is it feeling comforting to me? It's okay if it is. There's really nothing wrong with that. What I would like for people is that they enjoy the emotional eating experience, and to do it in a way that they're emotionally eating, but not necessarily emotionally overeating, right?
Okay, that makes sense to me. That makes a big difference. And I
Yeah.
love the whole approach, Vanya, and it's everything that you've been talking about in this whole conversation. And now that we're talking about the actual eating, it's such a compassionate, beautiful experience. That's what you're saying. And just kind of like, take some deep breaths, make this, you can have whatever you want, but just make sure that you're enjoying it, it sounds like.
You're enjoying it, you're taking your time with it, you're treating yourself well. There's so much punishing that goes on around emotional eating.
Yeah.
You don't need to be doing that.
Yeah.
Be kind to yourself. It's really okay. It's really okay.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I feel like I'm ready.
Okay, you're ready to do the exercise.
So you're going to suggest to our audience, I love that you said that. It's not something that you just watch. So even though I'm going to be participating, if you're an audience member listening right now, pause it, right? And I'll let you go ahead and tell them what to get and stuff.
Okay. So what you need for this exercise is 4 bite-sized pieces of the same food. So you could use, like Jools has got 4 bits of cheese. You could have 4 raisins, or 2 dates cut in half, or 2 dried apricots cut in half, or some pieces of small fruit, a cookie cut in 4 pieces, really anything that you want, preferably something that won't quickly dissolve in your mouth. And then when you've got that, then come back. Pause this and come back. And so what I want you to know, Jools, and whoever is participating in this with us, is I'm going to give you very clear instructions with this exercise. So if I don't say chew, then don't chew. So if you got the food in your mouth and I haven't said chew, then just leave it in your mouth. And if I haven't said swallow, then try not to swallow.
Okay,
but it's okay, obviously, if you do, because, and it's just so interesting. This is absolutely a learning process. It's so interesting to see our automatic behaviors. Very often my clients will just swallow or chew or whatever, even though they know the instruction, because it's just, we go into automatic pilot. It's okay, don't worry.
Okay.
But just do the best you can. I just wanted you to know that. You don't go, oh, you didn't say that, I already swallowed.
I would have done that.
Okay. So we're going to start off, if it feels safe to you, just close your eyes for a few moments. And if it doesn't feel safe to you to close your eyes, just drop your gaze in front of you and take a few breaths. Just noticing how you're feeling. Just letting your body relax a little. And so when you're ready, Jools, you can open your eyes and pick up your first piece of cheese. And just look at it. Really look at it with curiosity, as if you've never seen cheese before. And you can examine it, notice the color, the texture, the shape. And just be aware of any thoughts and feelings that are coming up right now. You don't need to say them out loud, just be aware of whatever's going on for you. You might be thinking this is a bit weird. You might be thinking all sorts of things. Maybe about the food, but it could be about anything else as well, just whatever's sort of popping into your mind. And so now I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and bring that piece of cheese up to your upper lip and just take a sniff of it, or just hold it there and notice if there is anything coming to you in terms of smell. And you can even brush it against your upper lip. Just notice what it feels like to have cheese on the outside of your mouth. Of course, we wouldn't normally be doing this with food, but we're just experiencing the touch sensation of the food. So when you're ready, you pop it in your mouth and just let it rest in your mouth. You can also just notice what it's like to have a piece of cheese in your mouth without chewing it. It's a different experience. You can move it around with your tongue. When you're ready, just notice as well what's happening. You might be getting tiny little bits of flavor, maybe saliva. Just notice what's going on. Slowly begin to chew the food you have in your mouth. Notice how the taste changes as you do this, but also how the texture is changing as you do this. Try not to leave it too long so it's not too difficult for you. Again, just noticing any thoughts, any feelings that are coming up for you. So now before you swallow this piece, notice that impulse to swallow. Notice what that feels like, that kind of desire to swallow. And when you're ready, you can swallow. Let me know when you swallowed that bit.
Swallowed.
Okay. All right. So now pick up the second piece.
Okay.
And close your eyes. Bring it up to your nose. Just notice how it smells. And brush it against your lips again. I forgot to actually say, so open your eyes, Jools. and just look at it and just notice, so much of the time we just automatically hand to mouth, and we're not even aware. We assume that the first piece is going to look and taste just like the second piece. But have a look at this one and just notice what's different or the same. It might be very similar, but maybe there's some differences. And when you're ready, you can pop this piece into your mouth. And again, just letting it be there. Noticing thoughts, feelings, letting go of any judgment you might be having about cheese, about eating right now, about doing the exercise. And being curious about your experience right now. When you're ready, begin to chew. Just notice the taste of this bit of food. Notice any similarities or differences from the last bite. Notice your enjoyment of it. Does it taste the way you expected it to? Does it taste as nice as you thought it would be? Is the taste and the enjoyment of this piece, is this piece more enjoyable than the last piece, or is it less enjoyable than the last piece? Just notice what's going on in terms of your enjoyment. And when you're ready to swallow, do so. And this time, really pay attention to the whole swallowing process and that point at which you know that there's just nothing left there. It's all gone down. Notice that. Let me know when that's complete. Okay. This next bit, the third bit of cheese, you're going to take yourself through this really in your own time, your own pace. There's no way it should be. There's no speed it should be. You just do your own thing with this one. Just noticing. Particularly be aware of your enjoyment, the enjoyment factor.
That was a good exercise there, Vanya.
Okay. Now,
okay.
the last piece. So pick up the last piece and just look at it. Now this piece, you get to decide whether you want to eat it or not. Now, there's no right or wrong answer. We're not trying to not eat the piece of cheese. What we're curious about is, how do you make your choice? What are you thinking about as you're deciding whether or not you want to have the last piece of cheese? So I'm going to let you make that decision.
Okay.
And when you have your decision, just let me know what it is.
I'm not going to eat the piece of cheese.
Okay. And I'm curious about what made you decide that.
Well, to be honest, I feel like I've had enough cheese, and it's not that I'm not enjoying it, but I just like the fourth one is, it's almost like, no. I think maybe later, maybe, after we stop recording, but maybe not too.
Yeah. Okay. So what you're saying is that for now you've had enough.
Yes.
Right? You've had enough cheese, or you've had enough of this taste, or you feel satisfied with what you had, and you don't really see that the fourth one's going to add any benefit right now. Right. Okay. And it's fine to choose to eat the piece of cheese later. So if you were going to be eating the fourth piece of cheese, and I'm saying this to the others who, might be choosing to have their fourth piece of something, just take yourself through the same thing where you're just aware, you're noticing, you're experiencing, you're aware of why you made that choice and perfectly fine with it. But also while you're having that fourth piece, it's so lovely to think about, where did this food come from? How did it get to me? what was the chain, that of people, possibly animals, plants, sun, rain, etc. There's a lot that goes into how it came to be here right now on your plate. So just to have a bit of thought about that, bit of thoughtfulness about that, and perhaps some gratitude, some appreciation for it.
Vania.
Well, thank you.
That was amazing. I just, and of course, I mean, I want to say, I don't know if I've ever even done that before, but just slowing down with those first 2 bites. And then I loved how you said, okay, just do it how you're doing it. And my mind is just like, I'm doing it. I was trying to do it as slow as I could. And I just noticed I wasn't even tasting it like I was tasting it the first few times. I mean, that was like very powerful.
Yeah, it's interesting how automatic it is, isn't it, our behavior with food? And so, well, what I say to my clients is, don't have the demand or the expectation of yourself that you eat as if you live in a Zen monastery, because you don't.
Right.
But just the first few bites, try to really notice, really taste, just practice with the first 2 or 3 bites when you're eating. And perhaps somewhere in the middle, you might just come back to, oh, how am I doing? Yes. What am I noticing? Am I enjoying this still?
Yeah. It was really amazing. And what I found too, there was such a difference in just having it in your mouth. And then, and it had a certain flavor, but when I started chewing, it was just like this flavor explosion that, when I'm just eating on my own, it's just more, I'm not even paying attention to any of that. It's just like that whole slowing down. I just loved that. That was such a great.
So we get so much more out of the experience of eating.
Yes.
So often when we're eating mindlessly, we reach the bottom of the packet of something and we just go, where did that happen? Yeah, how did I get there? Or
you're not even paying attention. Wow. Vania, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Just wonderful. It was. And I am looking forward to hearing, we're going to have a Facebook private group. So if you did this exercise with us, our audience, please post in there. And,
yay. Love to see that.
Yes. And Vania can see it and I can see it. And I would just love to see how this exercise worked for you too. Because that was very enlightening for me.
Great. I'm so happy. Thanks for being willing to do that, Jools. It's not really necessarily the easiest thing, quite exposing.
When I first read it, I was like, wait, you want me to eat as we're recording? And then I thought, of course, that's like, yes, of course I should do that. So it was really, that was my pleasure. I felt like I had one of your wonderful sessions. So it was great. So Vania, I feel like we've just covered so much and so many great things in this session. I know too that you have a free gift offer for our audience. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So what I'm offering you is a meditation, which is called loving kindness meditation for the body. It's like a soothing balm. It really is. It's really about using our bodies to send ourselves, our bodies, wishes of loving kindness. It's based on, if anybody knows the Buddhist metta meditation, the loving kindness meditation, but it's really towards our own bodies. And it's an opportunity to experience your body in a different way. And I really invite you to give it a try and let us know in the Facebook group what you think about it.
Yeah, that's a beautiful free gift too. That really is. Vania, thank you so much for being here and to being part of Magical Mindfulness. I have to say that this has been such a journey of really learning about being compassionate and accepting of ourselves and our bodies. And I can't wait to hear that meditation. I'm like the first one there.
Oh, thank you, Jools. It's been such a pleasure, an honor, and a privilege, really, really. Thank you for hosting this, and thank you for inviting me.